When werewolf movies are mentioned, what likely pops into the minds of many people are The Wolfman, American Werewolf in London, and The Howling. But there is an 80s film that is often unnoticed in this particular subgenre. This is my review of The Company of Wolves. The movie begins at a rather fancy and secluded house where Rosaline, played by Sarah Patterson, is sleeping, despite her sister Alice's, played by Georgia Slough, best efforts to wake her.
Come on out, pest! It's not because I want you either, it's because Mummy wants you.
It doesn't take long to descend into strangeness, as we're taken into Rosaline's dreams, which includes Alice being chased and attacked by wolves, resulting in her death. With this misfortune, Rosaline's parents, played by Toussaint Silberg and the late David Warner, have her stay with her grandmother, played by the late Angela Lansbury, who proceeds to teach her some important life lessons.
Never stray from the path, never eat a windfall apple, and never trust a man whose eyebrows meet.
Well, that sounds like it's either coming from a place of unibrow hate or a very specific story.
The wolf that ate your sister was hairy on the outside. The worst kind of wolves are hairy on the inside.
Turns out there is a story or two to back up this warning from Granny. The first involves a young woman, played by Catherine Pogson, newlywed to a traveling man, played by Stephen Reed. On their wedding night, he just leaves her, and she assumes that he was attacked and eaten by the wolves outside. Years pass, and she finds a new husband, played by Jim Carter, with whom she has 3 children. One night, her first husband reappears, and she's obviously a touch surprised. He's none too happy about the children and her remarriage. Before any real harm can be done, husband number 2 arrives, and beheads the first. Thus ends Granny's story, and it's time for bed. You know, I found some warm milk or tea to be more effective. The following day, Rosaline returns to the village. She tends to chores and deals with a village boy, played by Shane Johnstone, who seems to have a crush on her. The next time Granny pays a visit, she has another story to tell, this time about the son of a priest who was born on Christmas Day, played by Vincent McLaren, and, you guessed it, he's got a unibrow too. Nobody owns a razor around here? Doesn't matter, I suppose, because Satan, played by Terrence Stamp, doesn't judge. He's got a nice car, I'll give him that. And that's not all he's got. Apparently, one of the many things that the devil possesses is a kind of tincture that allows its user to turn into a wolf. And this is what he gives to the boy. I'm a little concerned about the living vine action we see here, but I blame that on Sam Raimi.
Oh, you can't trust anyone, least of all a priest. He's not called father for nothing. And don't bother to whisper, he's deaf as a post.
Granny don't give a damn.
Are you climbing up to heaven and chopping the rungs of the ladder after you?
Don't make so much clamour in the garden of God's house, you irreverent old woman.
You know, I never thought I would see Angela Lansbury talking smack with a priest, played by the late Graham Crowden, but here we are. After the sermon, the boy invites Rosaline on a walk with him, which is really just a ploy to get her to kiss him. But Rosaline's not really having it. Her running off results in the boy freaking out a bit, which is only amplified by finding a cow eviscerated by a wolf.
And all this one for your heifers another!
It's like a Little League game broke out. Thankfully, Rosaline shows up unharmed, but that still means that there's a wolf out there that needs to be taken care of. So the men of the village go out and make a trap. While this is happening, Rosaline ponders the concept of wolves maybe not being these horrible monsters everyone makes them out to be. So she tells her mother a story about a wedding party of aristocratic people that gets crashed by a witch, played by the late Dawn Archibald. Turns out she was the lover of the groom, played by the late Richard Morant, and decides to take revenge by turning all the partygoers into wolves.
What pleasure would there be in that, listening to a lot of wolves?
The pleasure would come from knowing the power that she had.
The men do catch a wolf and immediately kill it. Rosaline's father brings home one of the paws he cut off. However, the paw has turned into a human hand. Since the wolf that supposedly caused all the terror in the village is now dead, Rosaline is safe to walk to Granny's house. Along the way, she runs into a huntsman, played by Mika Burgess, who persuades her to have a picnic with him, during which he flirts quite a bit with Rosaline, and makes a bet with her that he can reach Granny's house before she can. He actually does manage to do this, and is confronted by Granny, who immediately knows he's a werewolf, and doesn't hesitate to beat him with whatever's handy. Unfortunately, the huntsman decapitates her. It's sometime after this that Rosaline arrives. Obviously, she knows that something's off, and uncovers that her granny was killed by the huntsman. Though she makes an attempt to defend herself, Rosaline doesn't fight back too much, as it wouldn't do her any good. She goes along with what the huntsman asks of her for a bit, until she decides to use his shotgun. Now it's her turn to ask him questions. questions about his kind.
Indeed, I won my bet. So now, you owe me
I remember.
a kiss.
Jesus, what big teeth you have!
All the better to eat you with.
I think that's a valid response. It does create a rather interesting situation though. Rosaline apologizes for shooting him as she feels sorry for him, and she tells him the story of a wolf girl, played by Danielle Dax. Said werewolf ends up in the care of the priest after being shot, and once she's healed, she went back to where she came from. At some point during the night, Rosaline's parents and other members of the village show up, somehow knowing something must have happened. As the two wolves run off, others join them, and suddenly they appear in the real world, around the formerly sleeping Rosaline. And with a rhyme of warning, the credits roll. The atmosphere and settings are absolutely beautiful, and manage to give a haunting feeling as well. There's a combination of matte paintings and full-blown sets that were used. Both work very well, especially in contributing to the storybook setting of the stories. We've got some attractive people sprinkled throughout here, and that's something I can always appreciate. Especially... Don't you judge me. I appreciated all of the actors and actresses very much, as they all seemed to fully understand what kind of movie this was. Angela Lansbury was perfect as the grandmother dispensing warnings and cautionary tales, and Sarah Patterson balanced both the naive innocence of a little girl and the quick-wittedness and fearlessness of a young woman learning about the world. George Fenton, who composed the music, put a lot of effort into giving each scene the proper tone. It's both grand and triumphant, as well as muted and eerie. Nothing but practical effects here, and I cannot say it didn't work. Some can look a little cheesy here and there, sure, but all in all, they were impressive. Let's keep in mind that An American Werewolf in London came out just 3 years before, and yet we're given a drastically different style of werewolf transformation. Twice. You can clearly see the meticulous detail that was put into every portion of this film. A lot of love, care, and creativity was shown throughout. I can see people finding this film a bit slow. If you're into slashers and fast-paced carnage, you're probably not gonna like this too much. It can be quite confusing. During my first watch, I enjoyed it, but I didn't know what was going on 80% of the time. Once you grasp that it's a fairy tale with dreamlike qualities, it gets a lot easier. So in that way, watching it more than once could be beneficial. With all that being said, I'm giving The Company of Wolves 8.5 out of 10 bloody thumbs up. The film manages to encapsulate the vibe of things like Grimm's fairy tales and Red Riding Hood while also separating itself from these stories that we're so familiar with. It all genuinely feels like some sort of dream. The interesting thing is that by focusing on the more grotesque elements of old fairy tales, it enhances the horror. Otherwise, this might not even be placed in the horror genre. For a long time, this was an extremely underappreciated werewolf movie, like I said at the beginning. What springs to mind first when werewolves are brought up? The Howling, American Werewolf in London, Dog Soldiers even, but hardly ever The Company of Wolves. Now, it may be getting a little more attention with documentaries like In Search of Darkness. The ending provides us both with the good guys win and the bad guys win scenarios. It depends on your perspective. Personally, I find it to be a case of the perceived bad guys, that being the wolves, aren't actually what the villagers think they are, and Rosaline sees this after a while and joins them. I would recommend The Company of Wolves to werewolf enthusiasts, those looking for a winter horror movie to get cozy with, practical effects fans, and anyone who wants to go a step beyond Eat the Rich and into turn the rich into wolves and have them sing to you every night territory. See you later. If you're looking for more werewolf films, check out my reviews of the Howling franchise. Thank you to my patrons Michael Museo, Bronson Wright Wolf, Diana Moe, Sean Sheridan, and Raiders AK for supporting the channel.